This conference will now be recorded.
Hey everybody, good morning. It is 11:40 in the morning and we are the second last day of February. It's the 27th of February 2023. I'm coming to you from home as I did with my last interview. If you haven't seen it yet, you will have to scroll through my videos and take a look. I was talking to Michelle Briggs from the United States Army Corps of Engineers here in Sault Ste. Marie. We had a great conversation. And right now, I am being joined by Ryan Ward, who is an engineer aboard the John G Munson with Great Lakes Fleet. He has been gracious enough to join me in this off season, and I appreciate it so much because I know when you're away from the ships, you have other priorities. So to take the time to actually talk to me is really appreciated. So thank you so much for being here, Ryan.
Anytime, and thank you for having me, and thank you for what you do in promoting our beautiful region of this hemisphere. I mean, the Great
Oh,
Lakes is a fantastic location.
I'm so passionate about what you do, and this is always fun for me to do these interviews because there's always something that I learn that I didn't know before. So, before we get started in your job, I'd like to hear a little bit about you because learning about mariners is what a lot of people don't get an opportunity to do. And I
Sure.
think your career is an interesting one. So, give us some background about what you did prior to becoming a mariner and what your job was, what it entailed, and how long you were doing it, and then when you started with Great Lakes Fleet or in the Great Lakes in general, and what made that transition for you.
Sure, no worries. So I'm originally from Washington State. I tell people Seattle because when I mention Eatonville, nobody seems to know that where this small logging town at the base of Mount Rainier is located. Um, but I graduated high school in 1991. I joined the military immediately after. I am a retired 27-year Army veteran. Um, and what got me into the maritime field is I was originally a marine engineering officer out of Fort Eustis, Virginia. Um, and the Haiti earthquake, as I kind of told you in our little pre-interview, the Haiti earthquake in 2010 was my last mission as an Army mariner. And after that, it's kind of funny you mentioned Michelle Briggs because I was a construction project manager with the Corps of Engineers Europe District, and then up in Fort Drum, New York, which is over by the Sacketts Harbor, Watertown area. So
Mm.
yeah, I was a retired Army mariner. When my wife and I were discussing my chapter two, what my chapter two was going to entail, I love sailing. There's nothing better than drinking your morning coffee, watching a sunset along as dolphins parallel the keel of your boat. And it's you know, after spending 3 years in a cubicle doing project management, there's no better office view than off the bow of a vessel. So um, I and plus, the military, whether it's I've worked with a lot with the Canadian forces in Iraq and Afghanistan as well. I'm sure the members of Canadian forces can attest that the military kind of has a unique way of taking something that you love to do and taking the fun out of it. So, um, but but sailing is what I love to do. It's do what you love and call it work, and that's what I'm doing for my chapter two.
That's amazing. How do you compare the engineering work on the Munson versus the engineering you were doing in the Army? Are there similarities and a lot of differences, or?
Centrifuges and purifiers they all serve the same purpose. Clean up the fuel, clean up the lube oil. It's a lot of the vessels out here on the Great Lakes Fleet are electromotive diesel. And I'm not sure if you've ever had a chance to go down to Ludington, but where
No.
the Badger is located.
Yeah.
But actually, I cut my teeth on the Army large tugs, and Interlake Logistics Solution, Interlake Steamship, actually bought the LT 805,
Yeah.
which was formerly the Winfield Scott, and that was one of the vessels I cut my teeth on. So
Oh, wow. Oh, that's
yeah,
terrific.
pretty cool.
When you started in Great Lakes, was it GLF that you were with right from the get-go? Is this the only company you sailed with aside from the tugs prior, or like in terms of the ships themselves, where else have you been, or is this where you've stayed?
So, well, I'm actually just getting started in the Great Lakes Fleet. As you can see, Great Lakes Maritime Academy. I'm really a recent graduate, despite all of my previous sailing experiences. And I'll kind of give you a little bit of setup as quick as I can.
Oh, yeah. Take your time.
When I got out in 2010, there
Yeah.
was no real transition from um, Army watercraft to getting your merchant mariner's credentials. Now, since then, there have been some improvements, and people are working on easing that transition. We have the military to mariner program, which is available to uh, any American service member. Um, so that transition's a little bit easier. And as I was explaining earlier, just because you sailed on Army watercraft doesn't mean you can get out and, you know, sail commercial watercraft. It's kind of like
Right.
what I was explaining, how Army truck drivers can drive for 250,000 miles around Iraq and Afghanistan carrying diesel fuel, carrying lube oil, carrying ammunition, carrying explosives, but they can't come back to the US and, well, they couldn't come back to the US and get a job with Lay's potato chips without their commercial driver's license credential.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but speaking of that, one thing I really wanted to make sure, Andrea, um, we had one of my Afghanistan deployments in 2011. As a U.S. service member, I come back to the States and everybody thanks me for my service and things of that nature. One thing I really want to promote is I've had a wonderful opportunity to work shoulder to shoulder with some fabulous Canadian service members. Steve Wist out of Victoria, British Columbia, Mike Voith, James Body, Anthony Robb, all out of Ontario, Melanie Lake, all those Canadian engineers that I worked with, they carried a lot of the weight too. And I just want to use this platform that you got to publicly thank you and your Canadian forces as well. So,
Oh, that's wonderful. And I love that. And that's something I mentioned earlier. I did a video share of the Canadian and US Coast Guard ice breaking together, and the unity between those two fleets and the ability to realize that alone they can't do it. They need each other, and that's the best way to make sure that everything is taken care of so that our economies can keep going and the ships can keep delivering products. So it's nice to see that that transcends in other avenues as well. I think Canada and the United States are the same in so many ways, and I love it. I love being a part of an industry that has both countries involved together, sharing responsibility. So, thank you for mentioning that. That's wonderful.
yeah, no
Um,
worries.
Tell me a little bit about the Munson and what you do on the Munson, and how much you enjoy it. What your favorite aspect of your job is.
I, for me, the Munson just being on, coming from oceans, going to Great Lakes, just being on a boat that was built in 1952. I
Yeah,
mean, it's almost like, kind of like the military, everything's built to accomplish a mission now,
sure.
and back in 1952, it's almost like these boats were designed by artists. There's so
Yeah,
many unique characteristics to them. Um, and, and I don't necessarily have one specific vessel, or there's nothing specific that makes any particular vessel my favorite. I've had an opportunity as I was a cadet to sail the Joe Block with Central Marine Logistics. I've had
ooh,
an opportunity to sail the Badger. It's kind of a, bragging rights to be able to say I've sailed the last coal powered steamship in the United States. So,
yeah,
um,
cool.
and I didn't get to sail the Munson. I was just up there for winter work.
Oh,
Yeah, helping out Michaela and Isaiah up there. Um, Chief Chief McGinn, he was our chief engineer up there. He's,
cool.
uh, you know, the neat thing about being on the lakes is it's kind of like the Army watercraft. It's such a tight community, and there's it's really like a family on the lakes.
I
So.
agree with that. I think everybody says that as well. Talk to me about winter work. What's involved in off-season maintenance of a vessel like this? Because a lot of people, I think, feel like the ships go and they tie up, and if they're not in dry dock, not much gets done. But that's not really the case, especially with engineers, because you stay on the vessel usually 12 months of the year, because there's always something to do. So give us a little bit of background about what you were working on this off-season, if you can.
So, I'll speak. Uh, I'll try to translate military terminology, or not military, but maritime terminology to civilian. A lot of plate cooler maintenance. Plate cooler works like the radiators on your car. It's
Okay.
basically serves as a heat exchanger. It takes all that waste heat and gets rid of it by use of seawater. Um, and over time, whether it's sand, fish, microbiological growth, stuff gets trapped in there. And if you don't clean it out, they can't perform their function as a heat exchanger. So
Okay.
um, and the same thing with pure lube oil purifiers, and whether you're running diesel or heavy fuel oil, those purifiers get clogged up with grit, sediment, microbiological growth as well. And if you don't, the saying, I know it sounds cliche, but it's true. If you don't take care of your boat's not going to take care of you.
Oh, that's true.
Um, and so, and whether it's Canadian vessels or United States vessels, you know, investment in maintenance is, I think, every company realizes their importance of the investment in maintenance.
Right.
Some of the challenges I ran into with winter work, I know this doesn't really have anything to do with engines, but on the Munson, that's on vessels so old, you kind of have to be cognizant of what projects you want to tackle, because you know, something as simple as a sink drain on a pipe that's 70 years old, you don't know how much corrosion is inside that pipe. So if maybe apply a little too much torque to that pipe, the rust holding it together might come off. And you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, sure.
It's, but, but, I was on the Munson after it's been retrofitted to heavy fuel oil Mac diesel engine. And prior to that, as you know, it was a steamer.
Yep.
So I didn't get a chance to experience the steamship. The Badger was the only steamship that I got to experience. But on the Munson, we had a couple of cadets, C.J. Griffith. I'll give them a little shout out. C.J. Griffith and Aaron Riker from Mass Maritime. Um, got a chance to rub elbows with some guys from Massachusetts, and it's if there's one thing that this community does, is it brings people together from everywhere, really.
Well, I think
Um,
what we want to try and do, and I know the Great Lakes Maritime Academy in Traverse City is wonderful at maintaining the cadets that come out of that program and trying to keep them on the Great Lakes. I think the hard part that I'm hearing from a lot of mariners is that quite often you go through the educational program, but because you have the option to go deep sea or stay in the Great Lakes, there are a lot of cadets who are not actually going to the Great Lakes and are going straight to deep sea. So, um, what made you, obviously, you've gone through the academy. Talk to me about being in the academy program and what made you decide to do Great Lakes as opposed to deep sea. Was it because you've already sort of been there, done that in the Army, or?
so, so I'll start off with the reason I chose Great Lakes Maritime Academy. When I was stationed in Germany, and Monica and I had decided that this was going to be my chapter two, that I was going to sail, we started scouting maritime academies, and we looked at Maine Maritime Academy, we looked at Massachusetts Maritime, Cal Maritime, Texas A&M, and we looked at SUNY as well. And one thing that kind of stuck out to me about Great Lakes Maritime Academy were two things, actually. Um, Maine Maritime was a beautiful campus. It's gorgeous up there in the Northeast. But outside of the Maritime Academy, me being a non-traditional student, having a wife and two children, I've got to keep them in mind as well. So one of the sciences of my decision-making process was, my kids are going to have fun here in Traverse City. They're going to enjoy Traverse City more than they would, you know, down in Houston and in traffic, or in Maine Maritime, hanging out with some white-tailed deer. uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but and then uh, uh, the second factor that contributed to my decision was, I kind of got a little a mom and pop shop vibe from Great Lakes Maritime Academy. And being from a small logging town, being in the country, I'll use a couple of analogies, for the hardware stores. The bit you got the the Home Depots and the Lowe's, where you can go and you can buy uh, a You can buy a grout float, you can buy tile, you can buy thin set mortar, and they'll be happy to sell it to you. But the smaller mom and pop shop, Ace Hardware, True Value Hardware, they can sell that to you, but 9 times out of 10, they've got the experience and know how to use those tools. And the class sizes were a little smaller. It was a little more personal education. And the instructors at the Maritime Academy are fantastic. The at Great Lakes Maritime Academy, they, you know, and I'm sure they are across the board, but I didn't get a chance to experience education in anywhere else other than Great Lakes Maritime.
Yeah.
Um, but I kind of thought that was a pretty cool aspect of GLMA, the smaller class sizes, smaller faculty. And you know what? The state of Michigan that was another little factor too. The state of Michigan was actually the U.S. naval ship Persistent, and it was built in Tacoma, Washington.
Oh,
So
wow.
I thought that little tie right there was pretty cool as well.
Well, that's great. How
So.
did you like the academy in terms of the work itself? Was it what you expected, or were there challenges that you weren't expecting to have to deal with? Or
So it was very thorough. I mean, I don't want to say, well, I had a little bit of an advantage being an Army engineering officer as well. So I had you know, a little bit of a head start going in. Um, you know, in all honesty, my biggest challenge being one of the non-traditional students, being the oldest guy in the class, was, you know, everybody says they want to be 20 again until they're surrounded by a bunch of 20-year-olds. So, but um, and I liked the opportunity to be able to share the knowledge of why why the students need to know how specific gravity takes effect inside of a purifier, or why you need to know the square root of 3 regarding 3-phase electrical calculations. Um, I, I think the school did a good job of um, uh, explaining to the students what they needed to know. And I think I would like to think that I contributed a little bit to the why they needed to know it as well. So
that's cool.
yeah.
Any idea which vessel you're going to be on when the season starts, or how does that process work? I know with some companies you put requests in for number one, number two, and number three, and then they'll pick whichever boat you're on and let you know a few weeks ahead of time. What does it work like there?
So just for right now, I've suspended my employment with Key Lakes Fleet. I'm
Okay.
going to be actually going and sailing with Foss Maritime
Oh, cool.
on their ocean-going tug fleet.
Cool.
And the reason for behind that, and I don't want to make it sound like I had a bad experience on the lakes, so I'm leaving to go to the oceans.
Yeah.
Um, I have an opportunity to work out of Seattle. And my parents, God bless them, they're getting up there in the years. So, if dad needs some brakes changed on the car, I have the opportunity to, when we're not towing a barge to Alaska, or when we're not towing down to SoCal, or I have the opportunity to go up and, take a day and check on mom and dad, see how they're doing. So, I'll probably be doing that for about 4 or 5 more years before I find my way back to the lakes. We're not relocating. My wife and I, we love this little corner of Michigan that we got here, the
Oh,
northwest corner
good.
of the Lower Peninsula. So we're going to
Oh,
be maintaining our residence here, and Monica's got her dream job as well. She runs a tasting room at one of the wineries on Old Mission Peninsula.
oh, cool.
So
Oh, that sounds awesome. Are
yeah,
you going to be away for a few months at a time? Does that sort of cycle the same thing as it would be on the lakes, or how does that work?
it's a little bit different. You primarily have MEBA and AMO are your two big unions on the lakes. I'm going to be sailing with Inland Boatmen's Union, and there's no doubt in my mind that I can go out and make more of an income anywhere else on the lakes other than with Foss Maritime. But for me, being retired military, I've spent my time away from the family. So my rotation is going to be 45 days on, 45 days off,
Oh, that's
versus a lot of the lakes. They primarily, I think a lot of them do 60 on, 30 off during their normal hitches. So
yeah. And
so
sometimes it
for me,
can
the
not.
time off is more important than the paycheck. So
Oh, that's
I've,
really good.
and
Wow.
my kids are really excited too because, growing up army brats is the term that we call them. Just as growing up army brats, they've had to move every 3 years. So this is really the first time, my kids are going to be able to go to high school and finish high school with the same core group of kids they started with, and
Yeah.
they don't have to
And
leave
you'll
in the
be home
middle.
more too. That's a
Yep,
nice thing.
absolutely,
At home
absolutely.
for a steady amount of time. That's a real big bonus for sure. Wow. Well, I hope we get to see you back here in the Great Lakes at some point in the near future, in 5, 6, 7 years from now when you're done out east. That would be good.
Well, I've no, I've, I've, I've let Interlake know that, I would love to get back on the LT 805.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Just, yeah,
Almost go
because it's
back where you started, kind of thing.
right, come full circle. So whether that happens or not, um, is yet to be seen. But we can. That I think that would be an excellent closure to my career when I'm ready to retire for good. So.
Yeah. Tell everybody, for those who might be interested in potentially sailing, tell everybody the process of what kind of credentials you need, and um, possibly where you can go to find those credentials to get started, because I know there is an enormous shortage on the Great Lakes for mariners, and it's something that I would like to address with every interview that I have with people. There are two major credentials that you need, and I think if we can get people to get those things and take the job seriously, then we might be able to attract some attention to it. So talk a little bit about the process of how you apply to become a mariner.
Well, I mean, first things first. If you want to get into this field, just I think the most important thing to know is you're going to be away from your family,
Yeah.
um, but it's not forever. With my wife, for me, it's easy because, I've got rotations to Iraq and Afghanistan that are 9 to 12 months at a time, and when Monica says, "Oh, you're going to be gone for 30 or 45 days," she's, like right now, I finished up on the John Munson and I'm back home, and she's like, "Don't you have a boat to be getting on?" So, but if you can take 2, 3, 4 months at a time away from your family, even for individuals that are just getting started in the field, whether you're just getting hired on as a wiper, you don't. There are there are fantastic career opportunities in this field. A
Yeah.
steward, a cook, a steward's assistant, an able-bodied seaman handling the lines. I mean, and one of the things that I really love about the Great Lakes Fleet, whether it was with Central Marine Logistics that I sailed with, whether it was Interlake that I sailed with, whether it was, um, uh, the Badger, even, Key Lakes, there's going to be a core group of individuals on those boats that you get hired on with.
Yeah.
It's kind of like one of the things I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but one of the things I had to explain to a lot of the younger students at the Maritime Academy, the instructors aren't here to watch you fail. They're here to allow you to succeed. And I'm not giving any misinformation when I say that everybody I sailed with wants the boat to succeed.
Yeah.
They're not going to mislead anybody. Um, whether it's you're a wiper assisting with a fuel oil transfer or a sewage transfer, or whether you're up on deck side handling lines, or pulling anchor, setting anchor. You know, th- this field is wonderful about sharing knowledge, sharing experiences. So if even if you have had no maritime experience whatsoever, your first day on the boat, you're going to learn something,
Oh, for
and then it's going to set your foundation. Then you're just going to build from that, and then if you've never sailed before, you're going to get on the deck of the boat and you're going to know exactly what I was talking about by watching the sunrise in the morning with your cup of coffee and thinking,
for sure.
"God, I'm getting paid to do this. This is my office."
Yeah.
So,
Oh, that's so great.
so
Are there a couple? I think there are a couple of websites that you need. There's two particular credentials that are important. I know there's a Merchant Mariner credential and your TWIC card, and
absolutely.
they both take time, and I know there's a process involved in both of those. So it's one of those things that if you want to do this as a career, you got to sort of plan and get started early because they take time to process, especially right now.
Yep, the U.S. Coast Guard is there. The U.S. Coast Guard website. If I'm not familiar with the Canadian website, how they or which Canadian
Yeah,
website they would go to get started,
yeah,
but the U.S. Coast Guard website. I mean, it is. When I was the chief of the Warrant Officer Training Division down in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, we kind of had this motto, write your form of instruction at a fifth grade level. So it's make your instructions simple to follow. And the Coast Guard really nailed that on the head because they've got step-by-step instructions on everything you need. The TWIC card for me was my biggest challenge only because when I initially got mine in 2020, my hard copy, the COVID was rampant, so the office, it was hit or miss. So you could schedule your appointment, but then by the time you showed up, it was literally the day of that they would decide whether the office was opened or closed or not. So that was a little bit of a pain in the butt, but you'll eventually get it. Once you're in there, you're in there. But yeah, absolutely, a TWIC card is a necessity, and a merchant mariner's credential is a necessity. And one of the things I would really like to stress is the importance of your any individuals watching that may want to get involved in this career field is, you don't have to graduate a maritime academy to get a
right,
merchant mariner credential.
correct.
It's the application is relatively simple. Um, you get your application, you schedule your physical, and they will they will assign you your credentials based on your experience levels. And even if you have no experience, you can still be an ordinary seaman,
Yeah,
able-bodied seaman. You can, a steward's assistant. And, even if you get on as a steward's assistant, helping out in the galley, you know, every every vessel that we've been on, their galley crew has been phenomenal.
yeah,
Um, and it's, it just everyone has of course you're going to have that that friendly rivalry, deck side versus engine side, and things of that nature, but everybody knows that it's one team, one boat. So it's um, and it's I just I can sit here and promote it until I'm blue in the face, but I don't think it's until you actually set foot on the deck and you get a good view of the breeze in your hair,
oh, for
the
sure.
and the view of the water, and the hum of the engines, that until you fully realize that, wow, this is a really fantastic career.
It is, and I think it's balanced because it's definitely a hard job. It's a physically intensive job if you're an OS or an AV, and it requires a lot of physical work to it, but you get rewarded for that at the same time. And you have an opportunity, regardless of whether you go to the Maritime Academy or not, you have an opportunity once you're on a vessel to move up the ranks in that vessel as well. There's a certain number of hours that you need to meet for each position,
Yep.
and then you can take courses to be able to up your skills or take exams to go to an able-bodied from an OS position, or
Yep.
you graduate the Maritime Academy, you start as a third mate navigating, and if you're in that officer's standing, and then you can go up to second, you can go up to first, you can go up to captain. You start as a third engineer, you can go up to second, you can go up to first, you can go up to
Sure.
assistant chief, all those kinds of things. So um, it
And you
doesn't
know what, the
matter,
hose pipe
it gives you an opportunity. So
and the people who we call those people hose pipers that made their
yeah,
way up, and the hose pipers, they are phenomenal individuals, as far as picking their brains. Because one of the things I told the Maritime Academy students was, yes, you've graduated now, but your learning is just beginning. Your education is just starting.
sure,
Um, and those hose pipers that you know they've just got so much information in there that they're
absolutely.
one of the things I've never really lost is my thirst for knowledge, and I love picking the brains of the old experienced guys. So
Me too. I love picking the brains of people like you. That's why I do what I do. I love doing photography and videos of all of you and what you're doing. But the learning of it is what's really interesting, and that's what I like to try and bring to what I do. So thank you so much for spending some time with me and being able to give me some background about you and your history and what you love about being on the lakes, where you're going, what you're doing next, all that great stuff. I appreciate you being here, and it's been a blast to talk to you. Thank you so much.
No, absolutely. And let me repeat the sentiment, Andrea. You and uh, thank you for what you do in promoting our field. Thank you for what you do in promoting the beauty of this wonderful region we live in. You and like anytime you or Kevin O'Donnell from Behind the Door put out a new video, it's like, it's for me, it's must watch TV. It's like, I love it, and
Well,
it's awesome. So
I'm glad you.
anything I can do to help you out to do what you do, please reach out. So
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this. This has been a great conversation with Ryan Ward. I will do my traditional bye for now, and stay tuned though, because there's more interviews coming up. I've got a lot of people planned this week to talk to. So we will talk to you all very soon. Like, share, comment, as always. Spread the word about Great Lakes shipping, the need for mariners, and all of the other good things that this industry provides. Have a great day, everybody, and we will talk to you soon. Bye for now.